Hello, good afternoon. My name is Bea Copen and I'm in Manila, the Philippines, specifically within the Malacañang complex because a few hours ago, our U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris visited Malacañang to pay a courtesy call on President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Of course, also in attendance was Kamalas uh, Vice President Harris's counterpart from the Philippines, Vice President Sara Duterte. Also there was DFA Secretary Enrique Manalo. Also there, of course, was the U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines. Now, before we talk about what was discussed during the meeting, or at least parts of the meeting that were broadcast via RTVM, that's state media, um, some quick notes on Vice President Harris's visit to the Philippines. So, ito yung first official na public event niya. Before heading to Malacanang, she actually did meet with her counterpart, Vice President Duterte, in nearby Aguado House. Parang harap lang yun halos ng Malacanang. So, naglakad lang siya. From there, going to Malacanang itself to pay her courtesy call. She arrived for having difficulties in the connection, but bear with me. So dun sa Bangkok, Thailand, yung nag-represent naman ng Philippines uh, or ng Philippine economy during that forum was President Marcos himself. May mga nangyari din dun sa Bangkok, but we'll touch on that later. Harris's visit makes her the highest-ranking Biden administration official in Manila. If you recall, during President Marcos's inauguration, it was first second gentleman Doug Emhoff who represented the U.S. delegation. Sabi nga ni Vice President Harris kanina, kung baga the second gentleman paved the way to this eventual visit. Paulit-ulit na sinasabi kanina, both ni Vice President Harris and ni President Marcos himself, no, yung importance of strengthening and reaffirming and reestablishing, or reaffirming, not reestablishing, reaffirming US-Philippine ties. And I'll talk more about that later kung bakit importante yun at bakit tila paulit-ulit na ina-emphasize yun ng both US and Filipino officials. She will also become the highest ranking ever US government official to visit Puerto Princesa in Palawan. That happens tomorrow. Puerto Princesa in Palawan is, of course, an area close to contested areas of the South China Sea. And of course, that provides the backdrop of her visit as well. And we'll talk a little more about that later. Again, this is a visit that seeks to strengthen U.S. and Philippine ties, friends, partner, allies nga yung catchphrase kung baga nung relationship na iyon. Hold on. If you have any questions or comments pala, you can leave them here and I'll try to get to them if I can. Okay. We are also among the US's longest treaty allies, and the Vice President did make a reference to this. Tawag dun ang Mutual Defense Treaty, signed in 1951. It's a 71-year-old treaty, making us one of the oldest treaty allies of the United States officially. Ano yung context ng MDT na yon? It means that if one country gets in trouble or is attacked, the other country may or will respond and help them in their defenses. Part din ng MDT na both countries should work on their defense capabilities, and that links to the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement or the EDCA. Dito parang operationalization ito ng treaty ng Philippines at ng US. Parang kumbaga living out and actually delivering on that promise to be defense allies. You can check out Rappler.com actually for details kasi EDCA is one of the things or the initiatives that will be launched or is being launched upon the Vice President's visit here. So yung EDCA, it was signed under the Obama-Aquino administrations. It allows the U.S. to pre-position defense assets here in the military bases in the Philippines. There is talk to expand that to include more bases. Again, yung backdrop ng lahat ng ito, if you recall or if you've been following closely yung ASEAN in Phnom Penh, APEC in Bangkok, Thailand, yung regional security is one of the big issues among the countries in the Southeast Asian bloc and even the Asia Pacific bloc. So in APEC, where Vice President Harris represented the U.S. economy, right before the opening, the formal opening of the summit featuring the economic leaders or the heads of state, heads of government, the heads of delegation of the member economies, nagkaroon ng alleged or there was a suspected North Korean missile testing. And because of that, Vice President Harris called for an emergency meeting with Australia, Japan, South Korea, Canada, and New Zealand. Um, the US wanted to lead those countries in condemning the actions of North Korea. Also, top of mind ng mga leaders ngayon in the region is the tensions rising between China and Taiwan over the Taiwan Strait. Nabanggit ni Ambassador Jose Manuel Romualdez, who was there earlier during the courtesy call, that President Marcos and Vice President Harris are expected to touch on or talk about Taiwan and China. So kanina, yung kumbaga sa courtesy call, yung binuksan lang to media, both Philippine and US media or the wire agencies, was just the opening parts of their bilateral meeting or the courtesy call. So during the courtesy call, syempre again, like I said, yung the rhetoric of emphasizing the importance and the strengthening of US-Philippine ties. But I think more than that, an interesting thing to note was that how President Marcos joked about or downplayed Vice President Harris's upcoming visit to Palawan. Again, this is expected to perhaps upset Beijing, upset China, again, because this is close to contested areas in the South China Sea. Earlier in Bangkok, when he spoke to the media covering him there, President Marcos sought to downplay that. Sabi niya, hindi naman ata yun makakadagdag sa tensions between China and the Philippines kasi Vice President Harris will be visiting or will be going to Philippine territory. Siyempre, you would expect the Philippine president to say that. But no doubt, parang the fact that the high-ranking official from the United States, second in command no less, is visiting an area close to that contested part of the South China Sea will definitely, kumbaga, raise the alarm or it will make China take notice. Kanina din actually, nag-joke din si President Marcos, sabi niya, parang it's a shame that Vice President Harris's visit to Manila is quite quick, to the Philippines is quite quick, but then he joked, you're going to see the most beautiful part of the country, and parang nag-joke siya na siguro naman, in fact nga, makakapunta ka ng Palawan to see the beaches and the resorts. Siguro that was an attempt to make light or to lighten the tension over that upcoming visit. But during those opening remarks, Vice President Kamala Harris did reaffirm, you'll hear that word a lot during this visit, reaffirm the US's commitment to the Mutual Defense Treaty. I'm going to check the full quote to make sure that we stick to what the Vice President said. So among the lines that stood out, Harris said, I have traveled here because of the many points that you have made referring to Marcos. The relationship between the Philippines and the United States is a long and enduring one. And sabi niya, speaking about the South China Sea, again, also emphasis on sticking to international law and convention in dealing with the South China Sea. But also, sinabi niya kanina, we must reiterate always that we stand with you in defense of international rules and norms as it relates to the South China Sea. An armed attack on the Philippines, armed forces, public vessels, or aircraft in the South China Sea would invoke the U.S. Mutual Defense Commitments, referring again to the Mutual Defense Treaty. And that is an unwavering commitment that we have to the Philippines. So I think that was one of the strongest remarks that the Vice President made during the opening or the start of her meeting with President Marcos. Sabi niya rin kanina, when we think about what is happening in this region, we know that there are so many opportunities for us to continue to strengthen our relationship. So like I said earlier, because after this week, actually, kaya rin naman nasa region si Vice President Harris because she participated in the APEC summit in Bangkok, Thailand. Before that naman, it was US President Joe Biden who participated in the ASEAN and the G20. That was hosted in Cambodia and then Bali. So you have these high-ranking top government, US government officials making official trips to the region. to participate in these summits. And of course, like I said, top of mind yung geopolitical and security issues that affect the region and beyond, really. Because although they happen in the region and they affect the region directly, the whole world is affected by these possible tensions and disruptions. Kasi, like for example, yung North Korea missile testing, Vice President Harris said that security issues also affect the economy. Referring, of course, because she was in APEC, where economic development and regional economic integration yung parang pinaka-focus of the discussion. So quickly, if this also parang this meeting, this visit by Vice President Harris also happens just after President Marcos met with his counterpart from China, President Xi Jinping. So during those discussions, and we already recapped that bilateral meeting several times, honestly, parang China emphasized in a release after the meeting na the Philippines should assert its independence and its foreign policy, which of course President Marcos agreed to wholeheartedly. But also, and emphasize, and the wording of this is interesting because it is not, kumbaga yung wording niya is not to say na this was agreed upon or shared by the Philippines and China, but China is asserting na yung dalawang bansa, China and the Philippines, should reject unilateralism, safeguard peace and stability. And also, let me check my notes para sure tayo na tama yung ano natin. They also made a reference to parang guarding against bullying in the South, in the region. Before that naman, si Xi Jinping naman told APEC during a business summit before the economic leaders meeting, he warned against the region turning into the arena of big power contests. He didn't make a direct reference to the US, but of course everyone understands that to be US and China's competition, or the rising competition between the two superpowers from the West and the East. So yun yung backdrop of what's happening. So you also understand, I mean, of course, it's always a big deal when a top-ranking US official makes a visit to the Philippines, the vice president no less, but perhaps to better appreciate the intricacies and the context of Vice President Kamala Harris's visit to the Philippines, you have to understand yung geopolitical situation in the region that affects not just the region, but the rest of the world. So like I said, tomorrow, Vice President Harris will be flying to Puerto Princesa in Palawan. Oh, before I forget, to add din pala to the US-Philippine-China dynamics, like I mentioned, President Marcos met with Xi Jinping in Bangkok, Thailand on the 17th, his first bilateral on the sidelines of APEC. But before that, back in September, during a working visit to the US naman on the sidelines of the UNGA, President Marcos met with US President Joe Biden. They already had their bilateral meeting. And of course, in January 2023, President Marcos is set to visit China for a state visit. So again, I think if you want to understand or better appreciate the significance of Vice President Kamala Harris's visit to Manila, you must also understand the geopolitical tensions, the situation in the region, and why perhaps the US and the US has a very obvious emphasis on the importance of regional peace and stability here in the Asia Pacific. So again, tomorrow Vice President Harris heads to Puerto Princesa in Palawan. We have Sofia Toma Cruz covering her visit there, so watch out for updates from her and from Rappler. That is it for now. You can check out, I have a story covering the major talk points during the meeting between President Marcos and Vice President Harris. It should be up on Rappler right now. If it's not yet there, you can check out our live coverage. It's a developing story page. It tallies all of the updates related to Vice President Harris's visit to Manila. So that's it for me. From now, I'll be seeing you again soon, probably. Again, this has been Bea Copin reporting about President Marcos and Vice President Harris's meeting here in Malacañang in Manila. Thank you for watching. Bye.